In the quiet stillness of a spring dawn in 1623, a piercing scream shattered the peace of Topkapi Palace. It wasn't the cry of a wounded soldier or the desperate plea of a captive. It was the agonized voice of a 15-year-old girl, Princess Fatma Sultan, daughter of the most powerful ruler in the world. Her shriek cut through marble corridors like icy steel. Even the eunuchs guarding the gilded gates recoiled in dread, too terrified to approach a scene forbidden to mortal eyes. That night marked more than tragedy. It revealed the price every daughter of a sultan was forced to pay. A price etched deep into body and soul, a truth buried by history for centuries. Fatma's cries weren't from physical wounds. They came from an ancient ritual that shattered the spirit long before touching the flesh. A ceremony that condemned Ottoman princesses to lives of silence, stripped of their will before they even became women. For over 600 years, the Ottoman Empire preserved a matrimonial preparation so cruel and refined that even its fiercest enemies would never inflict it on their own daughters. It was carefully erased from chronicles, hidden behind velvet curtains and golden walls, until secret documents surfaced in Istanbul's archives in 2019. To outsiders, the life of an Ottoman princess seemed like paradise: silk gowns, jeweled crowns, and servants at every whisper. But behind those glowing walls existed a nightmare so dreadful that many young women prayed for death rather than the fate that awaited them on their wedding night. And now, like me, you will bear witness to a truth locked away for 6 centuries. What follows is no fairy tale, but a tale of horror dressed in imperial splendor. Before we continue, I ask one favor. If this story has already stirred your heart, subscribe and tell us in the comments which queen or princess's fate you'd like to uncover next. Would it be Marie Antoinette, Cleopatra, or Anne Boleyn? Your choice will lead us to the next buried secret history tried to erase. Now come with me. Let's uncover why so many Ottoman princesses, born into palaces of gold, longed for the cold silence of the grave rather than the destiny of their bridal night. The Ottoman Empire, vast as a shoreless sea, ruled from 1299 to 1922, its power echoing across 3 continents. After the fall of Constantinople in 1453, the city, reborn as Istanbul, became the heart of imperial majesty. Within Topkapi Palace, golden chambers and perfumed courtyards shaped not only empires but human souls. Hidden behind endless veils and corridors stood the imperial harem, a world apart. At its height, it held over 800 women, a kingdom of silk and silence where every breath was watched and every gesture could bring fortune or ruin. In 1530, when Suleiman the Magnificent granted his wife Hurrem Sultan the title of Haseki Sultan, the harem changed forever. It ceased to be a house of pleasure and became an arena of political intrigue, an empire within an empire. Concubines, many captured from Europe or bought in North Africa, entered with dreams of power. Their days were filled with poetry, music, and servitude, each one hoping to catch the Sultan's eye and trade her chains for influence. Ironically, these enslaved women often had more freedom than the Sultan's own daughters. Between 1533 and 1656, known as the Sultanate of Women, royal influence reached its peak. Figures like Kosum Sultan and Turhan Hatice Sultan ruled from behind curtains, deciding wars and steering empires. Yet while concubines became empresses in secret, the true princesses, those of royal blood, were trapped in a darker fate. They were pawns on the empire's political chessboard, traded like treasures to secure peace or loyalty. Into this gilded prison was born Princess Fatma Sultan, daughter of Sultan Ahmed III and the formidable Kosum Sultan, a woman destined to rule from the shadows. Fatma's early life gleamed with beauty and learning. She studied astronomy, poetry, Arabic, and Persian, debated scholars in law and geography, and mastered calligraphy with a poet's hand. Chroniclers called her a prodigy. But brilliance couldn't alter destiny. From the moment of her birth, her future had been decided. She would be married off as a symbol of loyalty. Regardless of her will, her groom, Damat Kara Mustafa Pasha, a seasoned commander 20 years her senior, celebrated for victories against Persia. For him, the marriage was a stepping stone to greater power. For her, it was the beginning of tragedy. 3 months before her wedding, Fatma was forced into a ritual known as Terbiya-i-Mubarak, the sacred training. This practice existed only for imperial daughters, a centuries-old system of Psychological control meant to crush pride and mold them into perfect symbols of obedience. Her instructor was Gulnar Hatun, a 60-year-old matron of the harem, hardened by decades of princess training. Under her supervision, Fatma was escorted to the Angelino Dais, the bride's chamber. Though draped in silks and Persian rugs, this chamber was no sanctuary, it was a prison. Every detail whispered submission. From sunrise to noon, Fatma endured endless rituals of reverence, 18 precise forms of bowing, each designed for a different moment, greeting, serving, kneeling, or waiting silently for her husband. Even her steps were no longer her own. She was drilled in Yürüyüş Sessiz, the silent walk, measured strides, head tilted 30 degrees, hands always below the heart. Every motion stripped her of the identity of a princess, reshaping her into a shadow of obedience. The most brutal discipline came through speech. Her vocabulary was reduced to 43 approved words, phrases of gratitude, humility, or apology. Any hint of defiance was punished with fasting, isolation, or public humiliation before the harem. Her obedience was judged by a tribunal of women and eunuchs, presided over by her own mother, Kusum Sultan. Even she did not look upon her daughter as a child, but as a token in the empire's game of power. Yet the most horrifying part of her preparation awaited beneath the palace itself. In underground chambers, artisans had built replicas of bridal rooms. There, Fatma faced Talimi Gerdek, the rehearsal of the wedding night. She was forced to perform before lifeless wax mannequins, anatomical models crafted by Venetian hands, while instructors coldly observed. Her tears, her trembling, even her resistance were recorded in secret ledgers. The more she hesitated, the harsher the training became. The girl who once dreamed of stars was slowly broken into silence. Her laughter faded, her light dimmed. Her body learned obedience, her soul learned submission. A week before the ceremony, the torment deepened. Fatma was confined to the Gelin Köşkü, the bride's pavilion, a chamber sealed from all sound, where her every breath was dictated by ritual. Her meals were prescribed to maintain purity. Pomegranates, almonds, honey, and goat's milk laced with spices from Yemen. Even her baths followed sacred order, oils of valerian, poppy, and orange blossom prepared by alchemists trained in Cordoba and Samarkand. Some potions calmed her nerves, others numbed her will, and a few drew her into strange, floating dreams. Half awake, half lost to herself, the walls of the bridal pavilion shimmered with tapestries depicting perfect wives, obedient, fertile, and eternally loyal. Each promised heavenly rewards for their devotion. Yet behind this beauty lurked cruelty. Venetian mirrors positioned at every angle forced Princess Fatma to face her reflection endlessly. This ritual, once a sacred Sufi act of self-awareness called muraqaba, had been twisted into a weapon of psychological control. She was trained to monitor herself, to silence her own thoughts before anyone else could. In this prison of silk, gold, and glass, Fatma came to a chilling realization. She no longer belonged to herself. Her body, her voice, even her mind had been reshaped into instruments of submission. The transformation was complete. The spirited girl who once dreamed of the stars had been erased. Then came March 15th, 1623, the day her fate was sealed. From dawn, Istanbul pulsed with celebration. Streets overflowed with music, incense, and parades. Inside Topkapi Palace, golden banquets glimmered. Dancers from Persia and Andalusia performed to echoing drums. Musicians praised the empire's glory, and janissaries displayed their might before the Sultan. To the people, it was paradise. To Fatma, it was a prelude to punishment. Chroniclers later noted that while guests laughed and feasted, the young princess sat motionless, her lips pale, her gaze hollow. Palace physicians recorded what we now call panic attacks. Trembling hands, cold sweats, shallow breaths so faint they feared she might stop breathing. The empire celebrated. Inside her, terror bloomed like a dark flower. When the final toast was raised and the crowds dispersed, the most dreaded ceremony began. Fatma was escorted to the nuptial pavilion, an octagonal structure rising in 3 solemn levels: purification, submission, and consummation. Designed from the blueprints of Mehmed the Conqueror, it wasn't a building of love but of ritualized control. Every passage, every door was crafted to remind her that she had no escape. The first level, Taza, was devoted to purification. Here she was bathed in marble tubs filled with rosewater and sandalwood oil, her skin brushed with ambergris and rare essences from Somalia. Court alchemists applied ointments laced with diluted opium, mandrake extract, and secret compounds that blurred pain into strange serenity. They called it a state of divine calm. In truth, it was a trance, the body yielding while the soul screamed unheard. The second level, Teslim Katu, was the floor of surrender. Fatma was dressed in a gown of white silk embroidered with gold thread, every pearl hand-sewn from the Persian Gulf. It looked majestic, yet it was a cage. Hidden clasps and cords made restraint effortless. The crown pressed heavily on her skull, the anklets tightened around her movement, and the thick-soled shoes slowed her every step. Her royal attire had become a costume of captivity, while she was transformed into a living emblem of obedience. Her future husband, Kara Mustafa Pasha, was undergoing his own preparation. Surrounded by counselors and military tutors, he was instructed on how to dominate a princess, methods of psychological control, phrases meant to humiliate, gestures crafted to break resistance. Every detail was rehearsed so that no space for defiance could survive. Finally, Fatma was led to the topmost chamber, Tsifkata, the room of consummation. The walls were adorned with scenes of conquest, soldiers victorious, cities aflame, captive women kneeling before triumphant sultans. This imagery was no coincidence. It equated military triumph with marital subjugation. The furniture itself enforced submission, beds fitted with hidden cords, cushions soaked in calming oils, lighting designed to dim the will. It was there, amid trophies of power and silence, that Fatma faced her most feared night. When the doors closed, she was left alone with her husband. Medical records describe what followed as a total collapse of the spirit. After months of conditioning, Fatma could barely speak. Her hands shook, her voice faded to a whisper. Her eyes drifted as though her mind had retreated somewhere far away. The doctors called it sakma, a state of shock so deep the soul seemed to detach from the body. At first, Kara Mustafa Pasha, seasoned in war, mistook her stillness for arrogance. He applied his training, commands, threats, gestures of dominance. But there was no defiance to break. What he faced was emptiness. Her body was present. Her spirit had fled. When consummation finally occurred after hours of futile attempts, witnesses recorded it as an ordeal of despair for both. Persian-coded documents mention internal bleeding, fainting, and ruh sukmek, the departure of the soul. From that night onward, Princess Fatma was never the same. Days later, even the hardened matrons of the harem whispered in unease. The once brilliant princess had withdrawn into a haunting silence. She spoke only in faint murmurs, often staring into space. Her appetite vanished, forcing attendants to feed her by hand. She would weep uncontrollably for hours without reason. Worse still, she developed what chroniclers called the sickness of fear. The mere sight of a man, even loyal eunuchs, sent her into fits of panic. Cold sweats, gasping breaths, fainting spells. Palace physicians labeled it virginal melancholy, a polite name for what we now recognize as lifelong trauma. They prescribed music, herbs and Sufi recitations, but nothing restored her light. The girl who had once debated scholars and charted the stars was gone. Her books gathered dust, her instruments lay untouched, and the garden she once adored fell silent. The daughter of the world's mightiest ruler had become a ghost within her own palace. Her marriage to Kara Mustafa Pasha continued only in ceremony. There were public appearances, children, and state rituals, but no warmth. Behind the gilded facade, there was only distance. In his later years, Mustafa turned to opium and endless military campaigns, perhaps to drown his guilt for having obeyed the ritual that destroyed her. Fatma Sultan lived 29 more years, but she never truly returned. The empire recorded her as alive, yet history remembers her as the girl who died the night she became a bride. She became a figure of ceremony, a mother by duty, a wife without a voice. In 1652, at the age of 46, Princess Fatma Sultan passed away. The official record stated the cause as brain fever, yet her death fell precisely on the anniversary of her wedding night. To those within the palace, this was no coincidence. It felt as though the weight of memory had finally closed upon her soul. But Fatma's tragedy was not unique. It was a reflection of a pattern that haunted generations of Ottoman princesses. Centuries later, uncovered archives revealed that dozens of royal daughters had met similar fates. Some were left voiceless, others lost their minds, and a few simply vanished, erased from the chronicles as though they had never lived. The machinery of empire, perfect in its rituals, also excelled at erasure. What could not be destroyed was buried in euphemisms, softened with ceremonial words, and hidden behind elegant lines in imperial documents. Yet traces of truth survived, in secret notes, coded letters, and whispered testimonies preserved by those who dared to remember. Among those forgotten voices were women who, despite years of conditioning, found ways to resist. Recently translated records tell of princesses who faked their own deaths to avoid being remarried, and of sisters who created secret ciphers to communicate across the walls of their gilded prisons. Some, with astonishing courage, petitioned the Sultan himself for freedom, an act unthinkable in a world ruled by silence. These buried fragments remind us that even within the deepest darkness, sparks of defiance can survive. Women raised to obey still found strength to whisper no into the silence. Fatma's life exposes a bitter truth: absolute power does not protect those who possess it. It consumes them. While the world admired Ottoman princesses as radiant symbols draped in jewels, their true lives were woven with invisible chains. They lived within a system so finely crafted that it sacrificed daughters for political stability and alliances. The harem, so often imagined as a paradise of silks, perfumes, and intrigue, was also a stage of controlled sorrow, a theater of rituals designed to break rather than cherish. The stories told about princesses as fairy tale heroines were, in truth, political fictions, crafted to hide the suffering of those who lived behind the veil. And so, we reach the haunting question: how many secrets still lie buried in the archives of old palaces? What ceremonies of control were hidden within the courts of Europe, Russia, or China? How many women were forced to pay the ultimate price for the illusion of grandeur? The story of Fatma Sultan is not merely a tale of Ottoman history, it is a warning. It shows how easily power can turn its own children into offerings, how crowns often glitter above foundations built on human pain. For centuries, official historians painted the harem as a sanctuary of art, beauty, and refinement. They wrote of poetry and jewels, but never of fear, despair, or the quiet collapse of spirit. Yet, in hidden manuscripts and neglected medical notes, a different truth pulses. A story of young women silenced, their fates rewritten, their cries disguised as ceremonies. The scream that echoed through Topkapi Palace in 1623 was not the only one. It was simply the one history failed to erase completely. To know Fatma's story is to peel away history's mask. It reveals that behind every dazzling palace stood lives consumed by duty and silence, and that the brilliance of power is often no more than light reflected on chains. And so, we ask, how many voices still lie buried beneath centuries of ceremony waiting for someone to listen? If Fatma Sultan's story has stirred you, if it made your heart tremble, then join us as we continue to unearth the truths hidden behind royal walls. Subscribe, share, and tell us in the comments whose fate should be revealed next. Shall we uncover the secrets of a Russian Tsarina feared even by her mother? Or the story of a Chinese empress bound by forbidden rituals of power? Or perhaps a European princess traded like currency to secure a fragile alliance? Your voice will guide the next revelation, because only by uncovering these truths can we strip away history's disguise and finally hear the silenced cries of those sacrificed in the name of power.